Hey guys, what's up? It's Dante and welcome back to my channel for another video. This week specifically has been literally so insane with the amount of videos that I've been producing. I know you guys only get like 1 or 2 a week, but I have been kind of storing up as many videos as I can because as I told you guys, I am leaving to go to school in like a week or 2. So I'm trying to get as many videos out as I can before I leave because I'm not really sure what types of videos I'll even be able to make when I'm at school just because I might not have time, and also I don't really know if I want to be filming constantly when I'm at school just because I feel like that would kind of deter from the experience as a whole. So I'm trying to do as many as I can now so that way when I get back from school, when I will be able to make more videos, I want to make sure I have something in the middle for you guys so you're not going like months and months without any content from me. I didn't really realize the toll that true crime can really take on you. Like literally, like the past 3 cases that I've done have all been really intense, and like just the crimes are really awful. I mean, you guys know the James Byrd case, and then the Brendan Tenna case, and then now this case. Like these have been really taking a strong hit on me, and like I know the next video that I film cannot be something this dark and depressing because it's just really like I forgot, like I love true crime, like don't get me wrong, like I find it super interesting and fascinating, but sometimes I need a break, and so I think I might take a couple days break just to like clear my head because it's been really negative. Like this is the 3rd true crime video I've done in like 4 days, so it's getting really in my head of like, oh my god, like I need to see something besides the negativity and the brutality that humanity can have. And so, you know, I'm gonna be making some other videos, but we are going to do today's case. Before I get in, I wanted to plug this cup. Remember guys, in the OG, I don't know if you guys remember, but my OG subs might know, I would always plug the tumbler that I was drinking out of. So today I'm drinking out of my North Pole tumbler because, you know, I need to be in the holiday spirit because literally I just did a bunch of research of this case for like 2 hours before this, and it got me so depressed. Like this case you will see is really sad. So I got this, you know, holiday cup to try to cheer me up a little bit so I'd be able to film this video because honestly I did not want to film this case. I literally like read the entire thing and I was like, okay, time to scrap all my notes because I don't think I can do it, but I'm gonna pull through for you guys because I think, you know, this is a case that needs to be heard, especially because it is so violent and extreme and what happened. So that is why I have decided to do the case of Sylvia Likens for you guys. And yes, this was actually a Kaiser Crest, so somebody did use the form in my box down below, so thank you guys for using my box. Okay, on to the case. So let's get into the case of Sylvia Likens. So Sylvia Likens was born on January 3rd of 1949 in Lebanon, Indiana. She was born to Lester Likens and Betty Francis, whom both worked in the carnival industry. She was the 3rd of the total 5 children that lived in her family, and Sylvia's home life was described as being very hectic and unstable due to the nature of their parents' work, which was carnival work, so they were constantly moving around, and there was also not a constant source of income, so money and financial stress was a huge issue within the family. Her parents constantly sold candy, beer, and soda at the carnival in order to make some extra cash because being carnival workers didn't really make them that much money, so they had to sell things on the side. However, the parents did not really like Sylvia and her sister Jenny constantly traveling with the carnival, and so they decided to send them away so they could live with relatives and sometimes the grandparents because they did not want them traveling on the circus because they knew that it would affect their education and schooling, and they did not want their kids to not be able to go to high school like they were unable to go to high school when they were younger because they had to drop out and start making money. So a lot of the time she was not actually with her parents because she was being raised by other members of the family. During her teenage years, she worked to raise money for herself. She would babysit, she would run errands for other people, among other various odd jobs. She would also give some of the money to her mother because she knew her parents were struggling a lot to pay their bills, and so she didn't want to see them suffering because she loved her parents. Sylvia was described as being a happy and confident kid by the people she knew. She loved the Beatles, and her friend would often call her Cookie, which to me, if you have like a nickname like Cookie, it means you're just kind of like a fun person. You seem like a really cool person. Like, I don't know, my friends call me Cookie. I feel like I'm gonna be a very energetic and fun friend. She was also described as being very protective of her younger sister Jenny, who was known to be very insecure and shy. So in July of 1965, Sylvia's mother was arrested for shoplifting, and the father struggled to care for his family because it was hard for him, a single parent who worked a carnival job, to pay for 5 children. So another parent that he had met, whose daughter also went to the same school as Sylvia, Gertrude Baniszewsk, can't really pronounce that, but I'll call her Gertrude, offered to help the family out by allowing the children to stay with her family. Keep in mind, Gertrude actually had a family of her own, and it was quite big. It had actually 7 people in it, and the mainly important people that we're going to focus on in this family are her 2 daughters, Paula and Stephanie, and her son, John. So the parents had decided to make a deal with Gertrude, and so the deal was that Gertrude would watch after the 2 children, Jenny and Sylvia. In exchange, the father would pay them $20 boarding fee per week, so that way, you know, that would cover some of the costs of the children. For the first few weeks of this arrangement, everything seemed like it was going okay. Gertrude did not harm or discipline the children at all, and they actually said that they were kind of enjoying their time there, and they just said that it was overall an okay experience and nothing was really notably happening. However, about a month into their deal, the payments from Lester started to come in a little late. So for example, they would come in a day late or 2 days late. And so this started happening for a few weeks consistently. They would come in a day later or so, but they still came in. And so Gertrude became very unhappy about this. And she would lash out on the only people that she could, which were the 2 girls that belonged to Lester. Sometimes she would even spank them with various objects, and the object of choice for her was her paddle, which I'm sure you guys know what a paddle looks like. I'll try to put a picture here if you don't. And during the spankings and the punishment that she would give them, she would say things like, well, I took care of you 2 little bitches for a week for nothing, because she was not getting the money that she was originally promised. The beatings continued and they eventually got worse over time. So guys, I want to put a little trigger warning, I guess, for the rest of the video. I literally have 2.5 pages that kind of detail the abuse that they underwent. So if you guys are a little squeamish and don't really want to hear about that, I would suggest you click off now, maybe watch one of my other videos. I just think that for some people this might be a little too hard to hear, but if you are completely okay with that and not really squeamish or anything, I suggest you continue, because I think it's important that we hear this story, but I just want to warn people, like, it gets very real after this point. So one example occurred in late August, when both the girls had attended a church service where the church service provided them dinner. One of Gertrude's biological children accused the girls of overeating, and because of this, both of the girls were hit 15 times each with the paddle on their back. Around the same time in August of 1965, Gertrude had solely started to target Sylvia, and she kind of started to ignore Jenny, and she would put most of the attention of the beatings and the abuse onto Sylvia alone. So this was kind of believed to be due to Gertrude's jealousy of Sylvia, and people believe that Gertrude was jealous of Sylvia because Sylvia was just a naturally pretty girl and she had so much potential in life, and Gertrude was just kind of jealous of her. Like, I guess Gertrude maybe wasn't the prettiest when she was younger and isn't the prettiest now, and so she was jealous that Sylvia had this male attention that she wanted, and also that Sylvia had so much in life to live for, and she wanted to take that, you know, light and innocence that Sylvia had away from her. So most of the abuse at the beginning was very mild. I don't want to say mild in general, but mild into comparison what comes later. So for example, some of the abuse would be, she would be physically beaten with the paddle, or she would be denied access to food. So she was being starved a little bit. In late August, Sylvia and Gertrude and the rest of the children were having a conversation in the kitchen about boys, where Sylvia said that actually in the spring of 1965, so a couple months before she had moved in with Gertrude, she admitted to having a boyfriend, and Gertrude was very interested in this, and she said, well, have you done anything with a boy? And Sylvia replied yes, thinking to the time that she had gone ice skating with the boys, or even one time when she had laid in the bed with her boyfriend. And so obviously when Gertrude asked if you'd done anything with boys, she was referring to more sexual things in nature, but Sylvia was a child, she didn't really pick up on that. She was just thinking, oh yeah, like I've done stuff with boys, like we hang out all the time. And so the conversation ended immediately there. However, a few days later, Gertrude brought up the same conversation from before, and they picked it up kind of where they left off. Gertrude commented on Sylvia's weight, saying that she looks like she's been gaining weight these past few weeks and that she looks like she might be pregnant. Sylvia was assuming Gertrude was just making a joke, being like, oh, like, yeah, I'm gaining weight, haha, like I'm pregnant. And she was like, ah, yes, I probably should start a diet or something. However, Gertrude was not joking and informed everybody in the house that if you ever did anything with a boy, it would immediately end up in a pregnancy. And so because of this, Gertrude became very angry at Sylvia and decided to kick Sylvia in the genitals and kicked her off the chair completely. This was when Paula, which is one of Gertrude's biological children, started to join in the fight, yelling, you ain't fit to sit in a chair, basically insinuating that she's too fat to sit in a chair and that she needs to lose weight. And she continued to assault Sylvia by kicking her when she was already on the floor. Now, to me, it's very clear that Paula's motives were just completely jealousy and that she was projecting her own insecurities onto Sylvia, because Sylvia was a young, attractive, and not overweight girl, and Paula was the complete opposite. Paula was not attractive, Paula was overweight, and Paula was friggin' pregnant with a child 3 months along. So literally the mom was sitting there yelling at Sylvia about, oh, like, have you ever done anything with a boy? Like, oh, you're gonna get pregnant. When her daughter, who was right there, who she's never hit before, at least not that I know of, in my research I didn't come across that, is pregnant. So when I was reading this, obviously you guys could tell I was getting a little heated. I mean, I'm a little heated now, but before when I was reading this, I got a little heated. I was like, are you kidding me? It's just so hypocritical how she'll punish one child for one thing, but not the other. So another example of the abuse happened at dinner. So Gertrude's entire family was sitting at the dinner table along with Sylvia and her sister Jenny. And when they were there, a neighborhood boy was also there. This boy, Paula, and Gertrude all forced Sylvia to eat a hot dog that they had put an overwhelming amount of condiments on, so like ketchup, mustard, all this gross stuff. And they had forced her to eat it. And when you're force-fed things, obviously your stomach is not comfortable, you're stressed out, you're taking in food that you don't want to eat and you're grossed out by. She vomited back up the food, and Gertrude forced her to eat the regurgitation up. So obviously Sylvia was taking a lot of abuse at home, and she wanted to retaliate in some form or way. So the only thing that she really could do was start a rumor about Paula and Stephanie, which are Gertrude's children. Paula, who actually did abuse her, and Stephanie, who sometimes partook in the abuse but was not nearly as bad as the other two were. And so she started the rumor that both of these girls were prostitutes. And so a boy at school then asked Stephanie, like in a joking way, oh, could I solicit you for some sexual acts? And Stephanie was like, what are you talking about? And that's when it was revealed that Sylvia had gone around spreading a rumor saying that these two girls were prostitutes. So now obviously Stephanie was pissed, and so Stephanie went home where Sylvia lived at their house, and she confronted Sylvia saying, why would you go around telling people that I'm a prostitute? Like, did you do this? And she admitted, and she said, yes, I'm sorry, I did this. And that is when Stephanie punched Sylvia right in the face. Sylvia then started to cry and keep apologizing, because I think she did realize that what she did was wrong, and she felt really bad about it because she's not like the other people. She's not able to be mean for no reason. And so she apologized, and Stephanie also felt really bad about punching her, and she also said she was sorry. And you would think that's where the end was, but no, this situation gets so much worse. Somehow her boyfriend, Stephanie's boyfriend, found out about Sylvia going around and saying that Stephanie was a prostitute, and when he confronted Sylvia, he used complete violence on her. And specifically, he brutally beat her up by punching her and slamming her head into a wall. And then he finally threw her to the ground at the very end of this. However, the abuse did not end there, as when she had gone home, Sylvia was obviously beaten up, and the mother was like, what happened to you? And this is when it was revealed that Sylvia had started the rumor about Stephanie and Paula to Gertrude, and Gertrude was obviously pissed about this, and so she took her paddle and continued to beat Sylvia. So Sylvia was not punished once from the punch from Stephanie, secondly by the boyfriend, and third by Gertrude. She was punished 3 times for the same action that she did, which in my opinion isn't even that bad in comparison to everything that she's faced. It's just so sad to look at how they just treated her horribly, and they just used her like a punching bag. On many occasions, Gertrude would accuse Sylvia of being a prostitute, and I think this was due to Sylvia just being a naturally really, really pretty girl. And so in Gertrude's head, she associates being pretty with prostitution, and she's just, I think she was just jealous of Sylvia's looks and appearance, and so she wanted to call her a horrible and demeaning word. Gertrude would also constantly give her lectures about how dirty prostitutes were, and she would also say how dirty women in general were. Paula also would join in on several of the beatings that took place. There was constantly beatings going on. She was being punched, kicked, hit with the paddle throughout the entire 3 or 4 months that she stayed at Gertrude's home. And one time, Paula was so aggressive that she actually broke Sylvia's wrist. Gertrude, being the sweet sadist that she was, would also force Jenny, which was Sylvia's younger sister, to join in on the beatings, and she would say, if you don't do this, like, you're next, and I will make these punishments just as bad for you, if not worse. So Jenny was obviously horrified, and she had to actually beat her sister as well. Coy Hubbard, one of Sylvia's classmates, and a bunch of other people, by the way, from her neighborhood, because she lived in a neighborhood with a lot of other young people her age, were invited to come to Gertrude's house and also beat up on Sylvia during their free time. They would all violently abuse her by using her as a practice dummy in some of their judo sessions. They would also cut her body and burn her body with cigarettes. And I found a number of, I think she had over 100 cigarette burns all over her body. And this part is awful. This is like the worst in my opinion. All this is awful. Gertrude would also force her to put a Coca-Cola glass bottle inside of her in front of everyone. And she would force her to sexually do stuff to herself down there in front of everyone with a glass Coca-Cola bottle. Gertrude said to everyone while she was forcing Sylvia to do this, prove to Jenny what kind of girl you are. Gertrude eventually had to stop letting Sylvia go to school, as I think she was in fear that Sylvia would eventually tell one of the teachers, or the teachers would see that the beatings were just getting so bad, so Sylvia had to stay at home. And while she was at home, Gertrude would frequently lecture her on the evils of premarital sex and prostitution. During one of the beatings, later in the months of like September and November, Stephanie tried to come to Sylvia's defense by saying she didn't even do anything wrong, why do you keep hitting her? However, her mother, Gertrude, just did not care and kept beating on Sylvia. Jenny and Sylvia were both horrified to tell anyone, as when they did go to school, they did not say anything to the teachers who could have potentially stopped this, as they believed that if they did, it might make it worse, or Gertrude might completely lash out and be worse than she was than even right now. And, you know, to them, this is as horrible as it gets. I mean, they're sexually assaulting Sylvia with glass bottles, and so they didn't want to see what could happen if Gertrude was really upset, and so they thought it'd be best not to say anything. If Jenny would reference the situation to any of the neighborhood kids, who all knew, by the way, this was going on, and some of them would even come in to watch and join in on the abuse, they would all bully Jenny and make her not say anything and make her, you know, feel unsafe if she even tried to speak up to anyone. So the whole neighborhood was really in on this abuse of Sylvia. So we're gonna backtrack a little bit. In parts of July and August, Sylvia's parents would occasionally visit them at Gertrude's home. However, neither time did they see any physical indications of the abuse. And I think this is because most of the severe abuse did not actually start till the very end of August and into September, when the payments started to get a little late. Also in late September, the two girls, Jenny and Sylvia, had seen their older sister, Diana Shoemaker, in the park, who she was actually married and had her own family at this point, so they would see her kind of in town when they would go out. One time the sister had even given Sylvia a sandwich because I think she saw that she looked pretty emaciated and sick, and so she wanted her to eat something. And when Gertrude found out that she had been given a sandwich, she accused her of gluttony, which is a sin, and as you kind of realize by now, Gertrude was extremely religious, and she used religion to kind of justify her actions and justify why she would be so aggressive and mean and harmful to Sylvia. So when she found out about this, Gertrude, her and her daughter Paula choked and bludgeoned Sylvia, and then took her and gave her a scalding hot bath where every few minutes she would pass out because it was just so much pain she was enduring that they would slap her in the face to wake her up, to make sure that she was there and present for every minute and every second of her suffering. They wanted her to feel the pain. A few days later, a father actually noticed a girl walking around with open sores on her body, as this is when the abuse was starting to get very severe, and so he actually called the high school because he figured she would be around that age, and a nurse was sent to Gertrude's home to check in on the kid because I guess they identified it as Sylvia and they wanted to see what was wrong. This is when Gertrude concocted an elaborate story saying that Sylvia actually ran away and that the reason that she had all these open sores on her body was because she was not taking care of herself. This also would explain why Sylvia wasn't going to school, because she ran away. So to Gertrude, this was a perfect a story and a perfect excuse basically to get the school out of her hair, so they would never be coming back and investigating what happened to Sylvia. The school was actually satisfied with its answer and did never end up contacting the house again. A few times also, the next door neighbors of Sylvia had visited the house and actually seen Sylvia being abused by Paula, the older sister. However, they never thought anything of this and they never thought to contact anybody. They also visited a second time and they said that she was in a zombified state. However, they also thought, let's not say anything. When I was researching, there was a lot of examples like this when adults saw that Sylvia was in a horrible condition, but instead of saying anything, decided to not say anything and instead be silent on this. And so they let a 16-year-old girl suffer brutally because they were unable to speak up and stand up for a girl who was unable to stand up for herself, which I just think is horrible, and I hope that the parents live with that every single day, knowing that they caused another child to suffer immensely. The brutality that Sylvia suffered only continued and got worse over time, as now Gertrude had stopped allowing Sylvia to even use the bathroom. This caused her to constantly wet herself because she had nowhere else to go, which she would then be punished for and thrown into the basement naked for because she had to use the bathroom. Which just frustrates me so much because, like, I'm not gonna cry, but I'm literally so frustrated because it's like, what do you expect? Where is she supposed to go to the bathroom if you don't let her? And then she does go, and then you hit her for that, and then you lock her in the basement, and then she goes again, and it's a horrible cycle that just doesn't end, and it's so frustrating to, like, read about. At this point, and this is to me the worst part of the whole thing, Gertrude began charging children in the neighborhood 5 cents to come and abuse Sylvia. They could do whatever they wanted to her, abuse her, mutilate her, burn her, and just insult her and humiliate her. After she had done this, like, first, I guess, abuse party, I don't really know what else to call it, she had a lot of new wounds, and so Gertrude and a couple of the other neighborhood children, which, by the way, these children were 15, she is in her 40s, literally hanging around with 15-year-olds. This woman was not mentally sane at all. And, sorry, I just wanted to, like, comment that. It's so weird for me to, like, even talk about, like, oh, she was hanging out with these 15-year-olds. It's so weird. Gertrude, with some of the neighborhood boys, would hold down Sylvia in a scalding hot bath and rub salt in her wounds just to make her suffer even more. Gertrude and her son would also sometimes take the urine and feces from her youngest children, who were like 18 months old, and they would rub this into Sylvia's mouth. The abuse only continued, and Gertrude, after seeing that Sylvia had peed herself once again brought out the Coke bottle and made Sylvia put it inside of herself. The next set of abuse, I just want to give you like a timeline because I know I'm kind of like just going down a list, but I think it's important that you hear everything that happened. A lot of the next stuff is in October, so think of this like early to mid-October, the next stuff that's happening. So this is like late October is the timeline of right now. The following day, Gertrude decided to heat up a needle and carve "I am a prostitute and I am proud" into Sylvia's body. However, midway through, Gertrude said, "I can't do this anymore," and so she passed it on to a 15-year-old boy to continue carving into Sylvia's body the "I am a prostitute." And now that Sylvia had this carved onto her body because it was permanent, Gertrude would taunt Sylvia saying, "What are you going to do now that no one wants you?" In which Sylvia would respond, "I don't know." Because I think Sylvia was just at this point where she was so beat up of just, well, she was physically abused, but I'm saying like mentally too, she was broken. She had suffered weeks and weeks and weeks of endless torment by any person that she came in contact with. And at this point, she couldn't say anything else. It was just, she was over it. Later that night, Sylvia told Jenny that, "Jenny, I know you don't want me to die, but I'm going to die. I can tell it." As she was aware now of how serious her injuries were, I think she had open cuts all over her body, she had burn marks, she was lacerations everywhere, she was bruised. She knew her body was not in a good condition, and she figured that if she didn't die from an infection, eventually I think she realized, you know, if the infections didn't take her, then eventually she would be hit hard enough where it would probably cause brain damage or internal bleeding or something horrible of the sort. The next day, Gertrude had actually forced Sylvia to write a letter that she was going to originally send to the parents, saying that a group of boys had harmed and mutilated her, and that it was not Gertrude, but this group of boys. And so this was when Gertrude revealed her plan to the neighborhood boys who would frequently come over to her house, and her child Paula, that she was actually planning on putting this letter and taking Sylvia's body and dumping her in the woods where she would just eventually die and succumb to her injuries. Like I said before, she was also not being fed or given proper and adequate drinks, so she was completely dehydrated and malnourished at this point. On October 25th, after hearing this conversation, Sylvia tried to escape, but due to her weakened state, as I mentioned, dehydration, being malnourished, and just all the wounds all over her body, Gertrude was able to catch her before she was able to make it to the front door, and she dragged her back into the basement. Gertrude tried to feed Sylvia some toast, but due to the severe dehydration, she was unable to eat. And this angered Gertrude that she was forcing toast into Sylvia's mouth, but she couldn't chew because she just didn't have the energy. That she beat Sylvia with a curtain rod until the curtain rod was so broken that it was forming like right angles, it was described as. So it was literally like this, the rod. That's how hard she was hitting Sylvia's head, that the rod was literally breaking, a metal rod. But that wasn't enough, because then another neighborhood boy, Coy Hubbard, picked up the rod and continued to hit her with it after Gertrude was already done. The next day, on October 26th, Sylvia was completely unable to speak, unable to move, and was delirious, and basically unable to form human sentences. Her brain was just not working because it had no energy or no water. Gertrude tried to feed her, but Sylvia was unable to eat, which just caused them to be even more pissed off at her and keep hurting her. Paula tried to have Sylvia recite the alphabet, but as I mentioned before, Sylvia was not in a state to do anything with her brain, and she was unable to think, which, you know, she was only able, I believe, to recite like 4 letters of the alphabet before she stopped because her brain just wasn't operating right, and this caused Paula to continue to hurt her. Sylvia was then returned to the basement, where the neighborhood boys and Gertrude's whole family went downstairs to watch Sylvia in her final moments. Stephanie wanted to try and help her, so she gave Sylvia a soapy bath because she saw that she was in horrible conditions, dirty, bloodied, and everything, and I think Stephanie was the only one who really had any empathy and I think understanding of what was going on, because the other children in the home were younger, 10, 11, and so they didn't have a lot of, you know, they didn't have a big part to do with this, but Stephanie saw what was going on. I think she understood it was wrong. She did sometimes take part in it. I'm not going to defend her or anything, but I'm saying I think at this time she realized how serious it was. And so she tried to give Sylvia a soapy bath. However, it was too late as Sylvia had stopped breathing during the bath. Stephanie tried to give Sylvia CPR, but it was too late. Sylvia had passed away. Stephanie held Sylvia's body, crying because she felt awful for what had happened, while Gertrude screamed about Sylvia faking her death. And even an hour after her body was just laying there, she threw a Bible at her to try to resuscitate her because she was faking it. Police were then called to the scene by Gertrude, and this is when Gertrude had made her final plan to show the police the letter and say, oh, the group of boys did this. However, when the police got there and saw the state, they saw that she was malnourished. The bruising doesn't just happen overnight. Bruising takes weeks and weeks to form. So they saw that the injuries that she had were not something that would happen immediately and something that would take maybe a couple weeks to a month to develop. The whole family was eventually taken into questioning, including Jenny. Originally, Jenny told them exactly what Gertrude had instructed her to say. However, at the very end of this, she whispered to the police officer, "You gotta get me out of here and I'll tell you everything." The statement that Jenny gave them was enough for them to arrest Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, John Baniszewsk, John Jr., Coy Hubbard, and Richard Hobbs. Gertrude at first originally denied everything that she was accused of, however, eventually did say, I guess it was a part of this, but she blamed most of it on her children. So she tried to blame her children, who were 17 and 15, for her 40-year-old woman actions. In the final autopsy, it was revealed that her body had suffered over 150 different and identifiable wounds. Her injuries included burns, muscle and nerve damage, as well as bruising, and many lacerations. Her fingernails were also broken backwards. However, the autopsy said that her final death was caused by a subdural hematoma, which they believe was caused by a serious blow to her right temple. However, they said that the malnutrition that she had suffered from and the dehydration also just didn't allow her body to function properly, and so that definitely added to her body being in such a weakened state that it couldn't recover from the subdural hematoma. Now let's get into the indictments and the sentencing. So Gertrude, Paula, and John were all charged with first-degree murder indictments, and the trial began on April 18th of 1966. So a month later, on May 19th of 1966, the jury had finally come to a conclusion, so I'm going to skip over the trial part. Not much really happened besides just like the trial. You guys heard the story, so you know what they were presented with. Gertrude was charged with first-degree murder, Paula was given second-degree murder, and Hobbs, Hubbard, and John Jr. were given manslaughter charges. So now I'm going to tell you guys the time served that each individual person got, and you let me know in the comments whether you think that's fair or you think that's wrong. Gertrude was given 20 years, which she did end up serving, and when the 20 years had come up, she was actually eligible for parole, and when the state of Indiana found out that she was eligible for parole in 1985, they were completely appalled to hear that because they all knew the case. It was a very big case in Indiana, and they had started a petition which received over 40,000 signatures to stop her from getting parole and stop her from being released. However, due to her good behavior, she was actually released on December 4th of 1985. And in her parole hearing, she stated that the reason that she did what she did was because she was on drugs at the time, and she blames a lot of what she did on those drugs. She's dead, but when she was still alive after she had been released, she tried to push as much blame onto her children as she could, and she tried to say that she was not in the right state of mind because of the drugs. So she was released on December 4th of 1985 due to good behavior. So she only served 20 years for the murder of Sylvia. Paula served 7 years for her part. Keep in mind, she and the rest of the neighborhood boys, you'll hear their sentences too, forced Sylvia into a scalding bath, broke her wrists, and they forced her to eat feces and put it inside of her mouth. So was 7 years enough? John Jr., Coy Hubbard, and Richard Hobbs all received 2 years in a reformation school because they were all still minors at the time. So they were only there until they were 18 and they were released. So that is all I have on the time served and sentencing for the crime. So the final thing I want to mention is the Sylvia's Child Advocacy Center, which was actually made and dedicated to Sylvia Likens. The center basically just wants to be an advocacy group for children and to stop as much child abuse as they can and be a place where children can feel safe and where they will feel heard about their stories, because I think in Sylvia's case she didn't feel like anyone was listening to her, so that's why she didn't speak up. But they're hoping that this advocacy center will allow people to speak up and, you know, tell their stories about abuse. So yeah, guys, that is the story of Sylvia Likens. This case was super hard to research. I always say this, but I think my cases are seriously getting worse. This was definitely the hardest case I've had to research. I mean, you guys can see, like 90% of what I presented to you was the abuse, and it was just so horrendous to research, and there actually were some pictures that I saw. I don't encourage you guys to go look for them. They are there, however, but it's really hard to see her body at the end and how she was treated and all of that. But I think it's important that even though this case was almost 50 years ago, actually, this case was over 50 years ago. It was 54 years ago, because 1960, yeah, it was 54 years ago, but I still want Sylvia's memory to be heard and be known, because if Sylvia wasn't murdered at 16 when she was, she could still be here today with a family, but she wasn't given that opportunity. Instead, the people that murdered her and brutalized her for the last month of her life were allowed to go out, have jobs, get families, hide their identities so people don't find out who they were. And that is just so horrendous to me that Sylvia doesn't get a chance anymore at life, but they do. and I just feel like the justice system really failed in this case. And that's really all I can say, guys. Thank you again for watching another one of my videos. I hope you found it educational and informative. Guys, these cases are getting really hard to present, but I'm going to continue because I think they're important. I'm just going to try to do not like abuse cases for a little bit or like hate crimes because they're very upsetting. So I'm going to try to find something a little more lighthearted. But yeah, guys, that is the case of Sylvia Likens. I'll see you guys in the next one. Let's keep Sylvia in our prayers, and bye!